Now, Lou Gersner, who came to my AMP class, talked about the success syndrome. So I'm going to show you a short clip of him describing this pathology. So you get a feel for it, and then I'm going to move on to what do we do about it.
IBM suffered from what I call the success syndrome. Okay, and I can name a whole bunch of other companies that had the exact same problem. And that is, when a company becomes enormously successful, it has a great tendency to say, well, let's figure out why we're successful. Let's codify our success. Let's write down what we do and then make sure everybody does it over and over again. So manuals get written, training programs get written that basically reinforce and describe the processes that created the success. It's terrific until the world changes, because it's all internal. It's all internal. And when the world changes, these processes in many respects are, at a minimum, irrelevant, in other cases, detrimental to moving the company in new directions. So there's this, you get this great, I mean, IBM had training programs upon training programs upon manuals. I mean, you wore, a man wore a white shirt and long socks and blue suits, and it was down to everything, how you arranged your desk, how you started a meeting. And that tendency to get internal when you get really good is a real problem for successful companies. It's reinforced by the fact that there's usually powerful vested interests in the company to sort of maintain what has driven the company forward. So in IBM's case, it was mainframe or central computing. In Microsoft's case, it's PC software. In Intel's case, it's PC hardware. I mean, you can just go on and on and on. In Eastman Kodak, it was chemical-based film. The large central profit makers tend to hang on to what they have done in the past. And so when you don't have a culture that embraces the outside world, a culture that is focused on how do we clone ourselves and how do we do better internally.
So you get the idea. Now, I learned this, interestingly, in the last 2 years. I wrote a case study last year on Netflix. And I was intrigued by Netflix because Netflix did something masterful and unique. They disrupted themselves. Something that, my late colleague and friend, Clay Christensen, said was very, very hard to do. So here was Netflix that launches a DVD subscription business. What's the rocket science here? There's no rocket science here. I'm just, instead of charging you for each rental, I'm giving you a monthly fee, and I'm regulating consumption by how many DVDs you can have at a given point in time. There was nothing really to it. And when they went to Blockbuster and said, would you like to buy us for $50 million? They said, buy what? Anyway, they successfully managed to knock out Blockbuster. And then they immediately realized that streaming is happening, right? So suddenly streaming takes off. So they are now a streaming company. They have to shut down all those distribution warehouses they set up all around the country. And next thing you know, now they can't regulate consumption. So they turn into a content company. So that you want to watch their content. So to me, it was interesting. So I was doing my interviews, and a number of people said to me that, Professor, you keep asking us, how did we kill Blockbuster? We didn't kill Blockbuster. So I said, what do you mean? You killed Blockbuster? They said, no, Blockbuster killed Blockbuster. You have to understand, to us also, when we are there, Blockbuster had thousands of stores all over the country. We were an upstart. So how did, the most interesting question to be asking ourselves is, what happened to Blockbuster? What was Blockbuster doing or not doing? That becomes the real question over here. So that to me became, so I realized that, and this is what I was told, this is not a homicide game. Who killed whom? This is a suicide game. So now let's ask ourselves a summary question from all this opening discussion. why do successful companies have suicidal tendencies? And I asked this question because last year taught in a program we have, and I asked the group, how many of you, there were CEOs of companies, I said, how many of you believe that your company is successful? Everybody raised their hand. So I said, you know what? That's a problem. That's your problem. Because I had thought about Lou Gerstner's comment. So let's ask ourselves, why do successful companies have success makes you, what do you think? Janet, what's coming through?
Success breeds complacency, makes you lazy. There's an entrenched management culture. They don't see it coming. Complacency. No burning platform for change, overconfidence, sense of pride, being internally focused, hubris, arrogance.
Great comments, great observations. Thank you, Janet. And then you start, so I'm going to skip this poll, but so you have to ask yourself, we always say technology is the biggest killer, it's not. Netflix did not kill Blockbuster, ridiculous late fees did, right? And you have to understand, at that time, Netflix was making hundreds of millions of dollars in late fees. They couldn't let go of that, even though the new customers hated that, right? Uber, Apple, Amazon, Airbnb, all these companies, we don't say technology is not the real disruptor here. It's kind of inability to stay ahead of market shifts. We like to say technology is the disruptor. It sounds really good. It's really, there's something underlying it that we're missing. And Peter Drucker said this a long time ago. Acting with yesterday's logic. Something goes wrong. So I'm going to unpack the three, what I think are sources of inertia here very quickly, and then I'll turn to the upside story. Strategic, organizational, and cultural. And I think each of them plays a role in these companies kind of getting frozen up. And I think we all of us can learn something from this. Strategic inertia is the first one. You see, strategy is on one level is all about focus. Know your markets, know your sandbox, target customers, value propositions. Where are you going to play? Where are you not going to play? Where are you going to add value? Where are you going to subtract value? We talk about that, right? It's great. And I think all of us should think strategically about our businesses. But it also can make us myopic. It can also narrow our vision. The more focused we are, the less we see beyond our focal point. Kodak was zeroed in on film like a laser, and that's what made them so successful for so long. But at the same time, you can then ask the question that, what happens when we are so focused? And I'll just give you a personal story. So I grew up in New Delhi, and in my hometown, this is a garden. It's a beautiful garden smack in town, and it's very large. It's a large garden, and it was built in about 500 plus years ago by a Mughal ruler, and he's buried in there. And there are many such monuments scattered all over the garden, and there's a nice walk around it. So this is the entrance. This is the picture of the entrance. You walk in this way, and then you see those small trees, the Christmas tree kind of things lined up. That's a walkway, a circular walkway around the garden. And it's about 10, 12 feet wide. If you go there in the morning, there are lots of people there. People come as groups also, going for walks. So I've always gone there since I was a kid. So I have lots of, fond memories. So when I'm there, I always go in the morning, early morning before it gets too warm. And it's pretty crowded early in the morning. So I don't know, maybe I'm right-handed. I always go in and I hang a right. So that's my kind of thing. So, and I do a couple of rounds, and then it's a nice kind of stretch out in the morning. So last time I went 2 years ago, I went in there and I was going to hang a right, and there was a large group of people, about 10, 12 people, walking very slowly, and they were a group. And I would have to kind of really butt around them and to get a. So they were right there when I had the turning point, when I came there. I thought, you know what, forget it. I'll just take a left. Why not? Circular route. I'd never done it before, never. I did my round. I thought I was in a different garden. A completely different vantage point of the same exact round that I've done for decades. And I realized that, what happens is focus creates tunnel vision. The longer we've been around, and the more we find out something, I've been in the business 30 years. Let me tell you how it's done. I know it. I'm one of them. I'm a customer myself. What are you telling me? I know exactly what we're talking about. What do we see? We see existing customers. We see existing markets. We see existing products. We see existing capabilities. And these hijack us, these become handcuffs. We just can't look. And that's why sometimes you say, like, we miss opportunities. I mean, I'll give you some simple examples. Why did none of the lettuce companies invent bag salad? Or you look at the wheelie suitcases that every one of us has. Why did none of the luggage companies come up with that idea? It's kind of right under our nose. And why does it take somebody else outside the industry who has no clue about it to think about it? Or why do we hire consultants? So, we kind of get narrow vision. The other part of strategic inertia, I should clarify to you, is it's called competency traps. We build a strategy, and then we build capabilities around that strategy. Competencies, we call them, right? And then we're good at that stuff. And then to change means changing our competencies. So I'm really proud of HBS right now for what we've done in the last year, because we knew how to deliver in classroom programming. And we had to pivot ourselves and develop competencies around remote programming. And a number of the people who are supporting me today were super well trained on in-class programming, and they have successfully and remarkably transformed themselves to saying, how can I support online programming? But most organizations don't do that very well. We are kind of fixated on what we know. Sales forces, from the sales organization saying, we know how to sell X. We don't know how to sell Y. We know how to sell product, not solutions or services or whatever. We don't know how to sell annuity-based. We only know how to sell fixed-based. So strategic inertia kind of locks and loads, and we don't know. It's not like people are stupid. It's just the way we think. Then you have organizational inertia. This is the late Jack Welch, and those of who are my former students had a chance to see him a number of times come and speak. Look what he's saying, right? Organizations, the last thing to change are usually the strategy changes, then eventually you change your org chart, and eventually change other behavioral patterns behind it. You see, what happens is, think about org structure. We need accountability, so we need silos. We need consistency, so we create processes. So I think we absolutely need this stuff. But at the same time, this stuff creates kind of it locks us in. It locks us into a certain point of view. And that then creates a silo mentality. Now, I'll just show you one video just to illustrate the idea of what a silo mentality is, right?
We represent the Coke brand. We would like to sue Coca-Cola Zero.
Would you say that we have a case? For what?
For taste infringement.
We want to just sue them back to the Stone Age to send a message that they're tampering with really the flagship of the company.
It's one company. It's like you suing yourself.
Yeah.
But they're on a different part of our floor.
Da, 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 da.